Hi, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here with you today at the Data Points Conference. Thanks for coming to this talk. My name is Clee Pappas. I run the Global Innovation Analytics team at Colgate Palmolive, and I'll be talking to you about how artificial intelligence is helping us reinvent the consumer packaged good product development lifecycle. So I work at Colgate. Many of you are, I'm sure, familiar with Colgate, probably with the toothpaste brand, but Colgate also sells all sorts of products, brands that you've heard of, soft soap, Fabuloso, Ajax, and so on. It's a really interesting place to work and a place to do data science. We have a great mission, right? We help people smile. We're a global company. We're actually the most penetrated brand in the world. So 4.5 billion people use our products, which makes it an interesting place to do analytics and data science because pretty much the entire world is our consumer base. So we have to try to figure out how to develop and scale analytics approaches that work equally well for people in rural China and rural India and developed countries like Europe and the United States. So many of you may be kind of confused hearing me talk about Colgate and technology, right? It's like, where's the technology in toothpaste? So it is the case that the science behind personal care products is quite old, has been around for a long time. So here's, an old patent from the patent office and some old Colgate toothpaste, and a lot of things, have not changed in 100 years or so. And so you can directly pull ingredients and compositions out from the late 1800s and see a lot of similarities to products today. And yet there's a tremendous amount of innovation happening in the CPG space. So as an example of this, and I could pull out lots of examples, we're really using analytics to transform the way that consumer products are developed. So kind of an interesting thing going on recently at Colgate is we're launching an experiment on the International Space Station to look at how biofilms grow in microgravity. And that's really built off of the emergence or really resurgence of bioinformatics as a field and the way that analytics helps us look at complex biological biofilms and systems. But what I'm going to be talking to you about today primarily is how analytics is opening up the space for new innovation in a category or in an industry that otherwise you might look at and think is fairly stale. So as a couple examples here, Colgate has recently launched the first recyclable toothpaste tube. Why is that a big deal? Say we have 4 billion consumers around the world, just our products. They buy 3 tubes of toothpaste a year. That's 12 billion tubes of toothpaste that end up in a landfill. And so figuring out how to make a recyclable tube is a big deal. Figuring out how to make a recyclable tube that works across the thousands of products in our portfolio that we can sell and ship around the world, that's an analytics problem. How do we scale that up? The second thing that I think is quite interesting that's going on, that's an analytics enabled space, is a connected brush that we've launched called Plaqueless. Basically a brush with a bunch of sensors. It knows where you're brushing in your mouth. It senses plaque. It uses some machine learning algorithms behind the scenes to do some signal processing to distinguish plaque from gums and from teeth. That recently won an award at the Consumer Electronics Show. And then the last thing with you today is about charcoal. And here's an example of a product here of an optic white toothpaste that uses charcoal. And this really, I think, is an interesting case study for how analytics, and specifically innovation analytics, is really coming in to be its own space and becoming a driving force in how new consumer packaged goods get developed. So I thought charcoal was an interesting case to talk through because as consumers, any of you who have been to the supermarket or to the drugstore will have probably seen that charcoal products are everywhere, right? Every shelf, it's black packaging, charcoal foot scrub, charcoal toothpaste, charcoal face wash, everything is charcoal. So if you look at the percentage of new product launches over time, just across all of consumer packaged goods, you can see that there's an exponential increase in products that say something about using charcoal. And we like to say internally that we hit peak charcoal in 2019. There are about 2,000 new products launched around the world in the CPG space that promoted using charcoal. That's just over 1% of all new products that were launched, which is really a huge number. If you look at particular categories, skincare, oral care, that number as a percentage approaches 8 to 10% of all new products that were launched. And so Colgate, of course, is playing in this space. And, what I'd like to introduce to you before getting into the analytics is that, the charcoal products that we're coming out with and that some of our competitors are launching really are consumer, technological, and manufacturing innovation. So this is what innovation means in consumer packaged goods. So why is this a consumer, technological, manufacturing innovation? Just think about the scale here. So firstly, we have to have products that do something. So, a charcoal product that has clinical studies showing that it reduces plaque and gingivitis, or a charcoal whitening product that has clinical studies showing that it whitens better. But we also have to figure out how to launch these products around the world. So in a 3-year time span, Colgate launched, charcoal related oral care products in 68 countries. So the scale of doing that is tremendous. And, we have to develop products that meet the regulatory constraints in all these countries and actually are effective and work, figure out how do we manufacture and ship them everywhere. And so that's truly an analytics problem. So the question for us, in the context of this problem is, the question that was posed to the analytics team internally at Colgate is, how can analytics help us, one, understand what happened? So how did we get to a point where, we were hitting peak charcoal in 2019, and if you weren't launching charcoal products, then you were behind the times, right? And then that's really the descriptive analytics part. And the second piece is, how do we develop approaches and algorithms and systems to predict the next charcoal, the next thing that will be big in consumers' mind and be able to deliver new benefits years ahead of time, to give us enough lead time to develop products against it and develop launch plans and get those products out there in the world. And then lastly, how do we use analytics to respond quickly with meaningful products, right? So identify a trend and then quickly be able to develop a new product that actually delivers some sort of benefits and get that product out the door and on the shelves. So when we think about innovation analytics, there's sometimes what we call internally predictive innovation. There's really two sides to this equation. One is, what new product or products or benefit equity or ingredient equity do people want, right? That's a big piece. And then the other part is, what technologies will deliver on people's needs. So Colgate has a huge research and development arm. We have 1,000 or so scientists around the world who work on developing new products. And so how do we make it so that they can develop products more quickly? And then, of course, both of these two important sides of the equation are subject to a number of constraints. Products that we sell have to be safe, they have to be efficacious, we have to be able to manufacture them somewhere, they have to meet the regulatory requirements in the 100 or so countries that we sell products, and we have to be able to commercialize. And so just, focusing in on the left side of that equation, what do people want? When we think about predictive innovation, this is really people analytics. And so people analytics internally, we segment this into 4 major areas when you think about tackling this problem from a data standpoint and from an algorithm standpoint. There's geographic information, cultural trends, where people are located in the world, demographic details, how much money different cohorts of people make, age, gender, employment, and so on. Behavioral, so what does brand loyalty look like? What benefits are people looking for? Importantly, what's their purchase intent? And then an interesting area called psychographic, which is really about opinions, attitudes, and interests. So this is kind of the map that we start with when we think about people analytics, and dive into different sections here to put together an overall picture of where people are at. So focusing in just on cultural trends, really popular area that people involved in data science at large corporations like to look at, and sort of a burgeoning area where you see lots of startup firms playing, is in the world of search and social media analytics. And so this is, a common place that analytics teams will start to understand people. And, if you look in this case at charcoal, just is a descriptive understanding of what happened. So this plot here is a plot of charcoal posts related to personal care products over time. That's in the red on social media. And then in the blue is looking at Google Trends and also search trends in general. So including places like Baidu in Asia. And so, what you can see here, clearly something happened around 2017. There's a big peak in interest from consumers around the world. But of course, the problem for us as data scientists in the data science organization is we need to predict, say in 2015, that charcoal is going to be important in order to have enough time to develop a product that will be ready for 2017, because it takes years to develop new products and to get those products onto the shelves, right? And so how can we use this data, for example, to predict ahead of time if it's only 2015, right? Lots of trends look the same way that charcoal looked like in 2015 and don't end up where charcoal ended up in 2017. And so taking a step back, right, the right question here is social media even the right place to be looking? There's a ton of algorithms that you could throw at data like this, signal detection and looking at rates of change to see what would happen. But is this the right place to start? And so, I think it's important to point out an interesting thing that we've came across is that social media is not, I wouldn't accept as given truth or an a priori fact that that's the place to go to look for emerging trends, which is sometimes the sense that you get from people working in this space. And so internally, my team likes to call this the Kim Kardashian Paradox, which is really the question of are consumers and influencers creating trends that manufacturers respond to, or are manufacturers creating trends and influencers and consumers are responding to them? So another way to understand this is really, if in the context of charcoal, if you look at the actual text of the posts that people are putting out there, right? Not just do a meta-analysis, but look at what people are writing. What you find by and large, even at early times, is that the people who are writing about charcoal products in this case are writing about products that they've purchased, right? They're writing about products that they have already seen and they're responding to them and saying, wow, I love it. And I think it does this and it does that for me. And it's better in these ways, right? So at least in the case of charcoal, what we found is that if I wanted to be able to predict ahead of time, search and social media may have not been the first place to start. That's perhaps not where the trend started. So where would we go, right? So what you're seeing here is a graphic and a video graphic of the number of new charcoal products that are launched by year in different countries in the world, right? So larger bubble size here denotes, a higher number of new products. So what I really want to call out on this graph is look at what starts happening around 2007 in South Korea, right? And then look at how that migrates from the east to the west. So this is really extremely diagnostic east-west pattern of manufacturers trying out new charcoal products, and then those products working and other manufacturers getting on the bandwagon. So market data here, it turns out, is a really powerful way to understand this trend. And if you think about it, you can kind of understand why that would be the case, because we're looking at a marketplace, right? And so you have a small manufacturer testing out an idea, right? In this case, testing out the idea that charcoal face masks will garner people's interest in South Korea, Japan, and Asia. And then what happens, of course, is that product does well. People speak with their wallets, right? Then other manufacturers jump on, and then other manufacturers jump on. And then you can see this trend ultimately driven by people buying products where you get this explosion of charcoal. So if you look in this case, really the trend started 10 years before it made its way onto the social media scene in Asia and displays this diagnostic pattern moving across the world. You see similar patterns of benefit equities like this moving in between categories within the CPG space. So what do we do about this from an algorithmic standpoint, right? How would I be able to predict this? This is really a signal analysis problem, right? How do I find patterns and predict future states? So predicting patterns in multivariate time series is a well-known and solved problem and makes predicting future trends possible. So our team internally at Colgate took a lot of inspiration from work that's been done from an algorithm standpoint in this space, looking at people's gait. So there are algorithms out there that people have published on where they can actually take a video of you walking or doing some other activity and predict with a high degree of accuracy who you are, right? Personally identify you. So how do they do that, right? So really it's just looking at different points on your body, right? And so how those signals evolve over time. So in this case, if you imagine that kind of your knee and your foot and your arm, instead of being attached to you, right, each one of those are countries around the world, and the distance from the floor, which is the thing that this algorithm, the gait tracking algorithm is tracking, is the number of new charcoal products that are launched. Then you can map this gait tracking or gait identification problem onto the problem of how do I find patterns of other products that are behaving in this east-west migration and that are eventually going to explode over time. So this is an algorithmic approach to use that type of data to predict future states for emerging and developing trends. So now focusing in on the psychographic piece, right? So we were just looking at understanding behavioral trends. Looking at the psychographic piece, if you really want to know what people think, right? Understand their underlying values and norms and beliefs. The most impactful place to work is at people to look is at people's search behavior. So there's this wonderful book that if you haven't read, I would suggest everybody listening called Everybody Lies, Big Data, New Data, what the internet can tell us about who we really are. That's really all about understanding people's search behavior. And there's a great quote from here that I totally agree with, which is, I'm convinced that Google searches are the most important data set ever collected on the human psyche. So why is that the case? Think about you as you run a Google search or a search on the internet, right? You are looking for a piece of information, and you are fully incentivized to be as honest as you need to be with your search engine browser to find that information, right? There's no context dependence. You're being asked a question in the context of being a part of a study, right? You're not doing an interview with someone where you're worried about judgment. It's just your computer, you want an answer, you're going to type exactly what you mean in the language that you think will best get you the answer. So this is an extremely powerful way to understand people's underlying beliefs and values. So we've done a lot of work internally using graph network analysis, looking at the questions that people type into search engines and using some network analysis to group those questions together. So this is just an example here of the thoughts and questions that people, in this case in the US, are asking Google about charcoal, right? And so this graph network is grouping similar questions together. And what you can see here are themes that emerge, right? Themes that emerge as part of these clusters that appear on the graph network. Themes such as frequency, how frequently can I brush my teeth? And then you see things coming up about yellowing and getting rid of stains and repairing tooth enamel, and themes that emerge that don't explicitly use the word charcoal, but that are related to questions about charcoal. And, our internal innovation teams can dig into this and really understand what are the beliefs that people have about this technology, about this space, about this ingredient, about this benefit that we need to innovate against, right? And this is really a big data approach to things like consumer interviews, where you can only ask so many people so many questions. In this case, we're just asking, what are the questions that everybody asks about this, and use that to glean information about what sorts of products we need to develop against it. The last thing that we can do in the psychographic space is really start to understand what should these products look like? So it's one thing to, understand what language resonates with people and what technology will deliver benefit. But ultimately, in the CPG space, what people are buying is a package that sits on the shelf, right? So that package needs to convey meaning. And so what you're looking at this figure here is the top 10 most popular colors that show up on products that promote charcoal. So the top selling charcoal products over time. The thing that I want to call out here that's interesting, just without doing complex analysis on this, is look at the shift in color schemes at about the same time when, charcoal products were emerging as, something that consumers wanted to shift from sort of a regular color palette that's consistent with the brands that launched those products to highly neutral, dark blacks and grays. And by the time you hit, that peak charcoal period around 2015, if you want to be selling a popular charcoal product, it must be black or some shade of gray, right? Those are the semiotics that are associated with that particular ingredient equity, right? This is what people expect. This is what people are buying. There are some next level things you can do with this information too, more on the artificial intelligence side. So moving past descriptive. So some of you listening to this call might be familiar with generative adversarial neural networks. These were recently made more popular by Google, and there's a website called This Person Does Not Exist, basically scraping pictures of people's faces across the internet. And if you go to this website, This Person Does Not Exist, every time you hit the refresh button, you get a picture of a face of a person that is extremely convincingly realistic, and that person does not exist at all, right? These are generated using GANs. So internally, we've started to take the vast amount of packaging information that we have about products and the information that we know about what those products are saying about what benefits they offer or what ingredients they promote, and build GANs that, in this case, where you can say, build me a minty mouthwash, right? And it learns from those semiotics and the packaging concepts around the world, what products are doing well, and will build products and give you a sense of the imagery that you might need to be focusing on to build a certain type of product, whether it's a minty mouthwash or a charcoal toothpaste or something else, an anti-aging cream, for example. So all of these things give us a sense of, what should we be launching, right? What benefits do people want? Where in the world? What should those products look like? What underlying beliefs do people have about what those products should deliver for them, what they should do for them? But of course, that idea in itself is just a picture on a page, right? It is not an actual product. So the actual product itself is all of those things, that the packaging and the concept associated with it, but also the technology that goes inside the tube. So that's the other main focus area that we have when it comes to innovation analytics, which is how do we help our scientists develop products more quickly against the concepts that we're seeing emerge and get those out the door more quickly. So the challenge here is that, it can take years to launch a new formulation, right? You have the chemistry piece. Which ingredients do I add in? You've got 20 to 30 ingredients that go into a typical personal care product. That composition needs to be stable on the shelf for 2 to 3 years. It needs to have clinical efficacy. Consumers need to like how it feels on their hands or in their mouth. We need to be able to sell it globally and legally make claims against it. And we have to manufacture it and hit our margins. So, this is an optimization problem, right? That's why it takes so long. And it cannot be the case that it can take 3 to 5 years to develop a new product, because these trends move quickly and we need to get to the market fast to capitalize on the things that people are really asking for. So thankfully, Colgate has been at this for a long time. So just focusing in on toothpaste, if you look internally at our internal data, our scientists have made and tested 50,000 different toothpaste over the past 10 years. A fraction of those go onto the market, but all of those have been made internally in an experimental setting and tested, right? So we have a tremendous amount of data about how ingredients interact with each other to give a final product that has certain benefits and properties. So this visual on the right is just a PCA analysis of looking at the ingredients in all of our different products and mapping them to a sphere, just to give you a sense of the different clusters and segments of products that we have. And you can localize in here and kind of pinpoint the best starting point. And then ultimately what you can do is use this data to build predictive models, really models that will take in a list of ingredients and predict what the outputs are. So since I work a lot with the R&D community, people from the hard sciences, modeling is not new to them. So this is a visual that I like to show the team internally to sort of help them understand what a data scientist means when they talk about modeling. So people from a hard scientist background will know things like first principles models, right? This is, you open up a chemistry textbook, first principles model, you can calculate out the pH of a thing, and there's an equation you plug numbers into, right? People are also very familiar with statistical models, something like a design of experiments, which is very popular in manufacturing and research space, where you're essentially fitting a known equation to a set of carefully crafted historical data that's been designed in a certain way to be able to fit a certain mathematical, parameterized mathematical function against it. And then, there's the newcomer to the block, which in this case would be a regression machine learning model, which is really the area where we're focused on, because when you have a vast amount of historical data, you can build these powerful predictive machine learning models to predict outcomes that you're looking for. So what this looks like for scientists on the ground internally now at Colgate is they can go into a system that we built. They can put in a hypothetical list of ingredients. We have a predictive model that will predict for them attributes ranging from shelf stability to clinical efficacy, clinical attributes, manufacturing ease, what the sustainability metrics will be, and regulatory status, right? So all of these descriptive pieces, a scientist can build products and iterate on those products in a digital fashion. The second piece that's extremely important, especially in this context, and likely in all contexts when it comes to machine learning, is an explainer model. So one of the downsides to using machine learning as opposed to a statistical model, a design of experiments based model or first principles model, is you lose the explainability, right? Which is really one of the key parts to adoption and also to validation, right? Validation, because you need to make sure that the model is using things that are sensible to a subject matter expert to be using. And from the adoption side, when you're working with people who need to make a decision based on a model output, if they don't understand how the model came to a conclusion, you're going to have a really large uphill battle to face when it comes to change management and getting people to adopt the model. So all the modeling that we do is always twofold. There's a predictive model and an explainer model, and there's great technology out there in the world today, some things based on game theory that can build very good explanatory models that go along with a predictive model to not only give you, black box prediction, but also look under the hood and see what are the drivers of the different things that you're predicting. And I'd be remiss if I didn't call out here that the team that worked on this recently won the 2020 patent award for adaptive technologies for the work I'm showing here. So to close, where is this all going? What's the big picture for AI and CPG space? Our big hairy goal internally when we started on this and our guiding light is really to be able to ask a simple business question: how do I grow my skincare business in China? And have not a descriptive model, not just a predictive model, which is what I showed you today, but really a prescriptive model that can run this multi-factor optimization and tell us you need to be launching this type of product in this type of jar with this type of promoted ingredient. These are the claims that people associate with that people are looking for based on their behavioral traits. Here's the ingredient list that can go into it that will be stable on shelf and meet all of the regulatory requirements. Here's the pricing, here's the sustainability goals, and here's what the physical attributes of the product will be, right? This is where we internally, and where I believe that the entire industry is moving towards, to move away from the way that product development has been done since the late 1800s of what I call informed trial and error, and into a space where we are leveraging the massive amount of historical chemical product testing data that exists to be able to get products out the door more quickly that better meet the needs, wants, and desires of our consumers. And so with that, I really want to thank everyone for their time today. And more importantly, I want to thank the people who actually did all of the work that I showed you. This is some of the data scientists that work at Colgate. And I'd be more than happy to take any of your questions here, or if you're interested in some of the work that's going on, please reach out to me on LinkedIn, and I'd be happy to engage with you. Thank you.